Hey everybody, today we are going to go over how to test sensors before you go and fire your car up. So if it's a new build, you should always test all your sensors. So sensor scaling is probably the most common thing that gets screwed up. So people think that they've got 80 pounds of fuel pressure, but in reality they got like 40 or something like that. So I'm just going to kind of go over the basics of how we go about testing sensors, whether it be pressure, temp, VPS, EGTs, all that kind of stuff. So up here, kind of hard to see, but what I did was I built so this is the gauge panel in Holley, right? So if you don't know how to get to your gauge panel in Holley, you go online with the computer right there, right up here, right? And then you go over to here, hit gauge panel. So if you don't know how to do this, you should have watched one of my other videos. But if you click that little E tab, it populates this window, and you can click and drag whatever you want over in all these different boxes, right? So these are some sensors that we added to the car. So as you see over here, it says EGTs, VPS stuff here. Then there's turbo shaft speed, blow-off valve position, gate position, right rear shock, left rear or right front shock, blah, 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 tire temp, track temp. And then over there we got fuel pressure, CO2 dome, map, all that stuff. So right away we can see where it says track temp 568 degrees. It is not 568 degrees. I have it unplugged. So, but if we look at tire temp, it says 67, 66, 67 degrees. So a real simple thing to do here is, here's the tire temp sensor, right? It's in my hand. And what we can do is I'm going to hold it up, tire temp, hold it up to my face. All right, so I'm like 96 degrees. And then it's away from my face and we're back down to 67. So we know at least it's working correctly, right? Breathe on it. There you go. Right? Pretty scientific there, you know what I mean? So I've been told I'm full of hot air, and apparently I am. So that's, one way of testing a temp sensor. Just make sure this stuff works before you go out like you bought it. You should probably make sure it works. So now let's look at EGTs, right? So we've got an EGT module from Holley. It's mounted up here. It's all working, but all the lights are green. Well, how do we know it's the right sensors, right? So here's our Mad Racing bulkheads for the EGT probes. We've got them labeled, we know that they're correct, but let's just make sure, right? So if you go back and watch the screen here, over there on EGTs, as I unplug them, I'm gonna unplug number 2, and you see number 2 jumps up, right? I'm gonna plug number 2 back in, unplug number 4, number 4 moves, right? Number 6, yep. Number 8, pretty basic. So unplug your stuff, plug it back in, see if it moves. See if it goes in the right direction. Next, let's look at the VPS. So here's our VPS screen. If we go to utilities, we can go to test outputs. So if we're going to go through these, but I'm going to show you on the screen as I press test 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's look up here. I got it labeled VPS 1 x-axis, right? So that means it's output number 1 from the VPS. I hit test 1, and we notice that the G jumps all the way down and then all the way up. Let's go to test 2, swing, swing, test 3, ding dang, test 4, yee yee, test 5. There you go. So they all work, right? So that's all correct. Now let's look at pressure sensors. So this is the one that everybody seems to have problems with, right? So you buy your pressure sensor. Some of you guys buy your pressure transducers from fresh off the boat, from Ching Chang and Yin Yang, and you have no idea what the scaling is. It came off of eBay. So we don't do that, but we use Rife sensors. We use Holley pressure transducers, Race Pack. So typically you have good data on them, but either way, no matter what they are, I still like to test them, right? So this little rig works pretty good. This is a little Milwaukee air compressor. I barely use any air tools. So Laura got me this for Christmas. It's fantastic. It's nice and quiet. This dial right here is our regulator, our regulated output, right? And then what I do is I've got a pressure gauge from Holley. Kind of got it ghetto rigged, you know. Whoop-de-doo, push lock line. I have a push lock line on this just because it's easy to move, and then it's adapted from push lock over to 3AN. We've got a 3AN hose, and now we've got pressure on the bottom of the gauge. So this is a 200 PSI sensor. If we go over to the screen there, I fell asleep. There we go. So right now we are on fuel pressure. I don't know if you can see fuel pressure on there. It's touch screen.
I wasn't touching the screen.
Okay. So we're on fuel pressure. We'll charge this thing up, and we should have somewhere right around 60 PSI. So my gauge right out here is reading 58, 59.
This is reading 55.
And then you're at 55, right? So is my gauge right? I don't know, because, well, I've dropped it a lot. But is it leaking from here, from this gauge to where it's hooked up? Probably. And the reason I say that is because, well, it's hand tight. So I don't look for an exact number here, but this thing's hand tight. So yes, it's leaking. You can hear it, right? So it's pissing a little bit. So my gauge reading 60 here, and us only having 55 there is not a big surprise. So, but either way, we know that it is wired correctly. It's for our fuel pressure circuit, and we're pretty damn close. Now, if this was scaled for a 100 PSI sensor, then we would only be showing 27.5 pounds of fuel pressure. So this is a good way to, charge it with compressed air and make sure all of your sensors are accurate. So you could be a little bit more scientific about it and get it down to the, the 10th of a PSI. But for this purpose on this video, this just gives you the gist of how to do it. So anyway, you do the same thing with shock travel or any of that kind of stuff. So test all your stuff before you go out and make passes with the car, because bad data is not worth a shit, and inaccurate data is even worse than no data. So, all right, see ya.